It was supposed to be simple. A quiet, early morning flight out of Atlanta International Airport. Nothing unusual. Nothing dramatic. Just another business trip for a man who lived his life by logic, order, and precision. Phill Smith arrived before sunrise. Black man. Mid-30s. Neat blazer. Pressed shirt. Boarding pass tucked between his fingers. Laptop bag balanced over his shoulder, the same one he carried for every major engineering presentation. He moved through the terminal with calm purpose. Today mattered. He was scheduled to present the final phase of an aviation safety redesign, a system his company hoped would change the future of cockpit operations. Pilots' lives depended on technology. Airlines counted on its success. And Phill was the lead engineer behind it. He wasn't nervous. He was ready. Security was busy, but smooth. A line of travelers flowed toward the metal detectors. Families. Business flyers. Students. People laughed quietly, sipped coffee, and scrolled on their phones. Phill stepped forward with the rest of them. And then, everything shifted. Because one TSA officer saw him and wouldn't look away. Officer Sandra. Tall. Cold stare. Jaw tight. Eyes locked onto Phill like she'd found something she wanted to break. Phill noticed the stare, but ignored it. People stared sometimes. He'd learned not to flinch. He placed his items in the bin. Laptop. Shoes. Bag. Simple. He stepped forward. But Sandra stepped in front of him. ID. Her voice was sharp. Loud enough to turn heads. Phill kept his tone steady. Yes, ma'am. He handed it over. She looked at it too long. Flipped it. Hold it to the light. Squinted like she was reading ancient text. What's your purpose for traveling? Business. Specifics. I'm an engineer. I'm presenting. Why are you traveling alone? Because that's standard for work trips. She didn't blink. Is this your laptop? Yes. Your bag? Yes. Your ticket? Yes. Other passengers walked past without interruption. Families. Teens. A man with a metal knee brace. Everyone glided through. But Phill was ordered aside. Step over there. No explanation. No reason. Just authority mixed with suspicion. Phill kept calm. He'd dealt with this type of scrutiny before. Too many times. Always the same tone. Always the same stare. But he didn't raise his voice. Didn't argue. Didn't give her anything she could twist. He stood in the secondary screening zone. She circled him like she was looking for a problem to invent. Why are you really traveling? I already told you. How long is your trip? 2 days. What company? HarborTech Aviation Systems. What department? Engineering. What kind? Aerospace, specifically. Answer the question directly. He had answered it. Phill took a breath. Ma'am, I am answering directly. Her jaw twitched, and something inside her snapped. Because the calmer he became, the angrier she grew. Her voice sharpened. Her questions became rapid, unreasonable, and personal. Why are you breathing like that? Why is your tone raised? Are you hiding something? Why are you smiling? Why are you looking at me? Phill wasn't smiling. Phill wasn't raising his tone. Phill wasn't hiding anything. He was standing still, while she spiraled. When he defended himself, he chose every word with precision. Ma'am, with respect. I'm cooperating. I'm not resisting. I'd just like to know what the issue. She stepped toward him. Too close. You could feel the electricity shift. Passengers turned their heads. Cameras tilted. A hush rolled across the security lane. Sandra jabbed her finger into his shoulder. Phill didn't move. Do not touch me, he said softly. She grabbed his wrist. The crowd gasped. A few phones were lifted. "Ma'am," Phill warned. "You're..." And then she did it. The moment that turned the entire airport into a witness. She wrapped her hand around his throat. A full grip. Right there in the middle of the terminal. In front of families, children, travelers who were now frozen in shock. Voices erupted. "Hey! What are you doing? Let him go. Get your hands off him." Phill didn't fight, didn't swing, didn't even flinch. He kept his hands visible, kept his voice level, kept his training, his self-control, locked in place. "Take your hand off me," he said. Sandra leaned in, snarled into his ear. "Shut your mouth now," she squeezed. The airport erupted into chaos. But then, a sound tore through the noise. "Let him go." It wasn't the police. It wasn't security. It was the airline crew. The operating captain. 2 flight attendants. A gate supervisor. They weren't walking, they were sprinting. The captain grabbed Sandra's arm and yanked it off Phil's throat. The gate supervisor stepped forward and shoved Sandra back, not hard, but firm. Firm enough to create space. Firm enough to show authority. They formed a wall around Phill. A barrier of uniforms and outrage. Like bodyguards around the most important person in the terminal. Because to them, he was. "Are you all right, Phill?" the captain asked. "Not sir. Not passenger." Phill. As if they knew him. Because they did. Phill wasn't just on their plane. Phill designed the very system that would keep their pilots safe. Their colleagues. Their friends. He wasn't a stranger to them. He was essential. The gate supervisor stepped forward. Voice steady. Voice loud. Voice clear enough that every phone recording captured it. "Touch him again, and this entire airline will file federal misconduct charges against you." The security command arrived. Sandra was relieved of duty on the spot. Witness statements poured in like a flood. Phill stood in the middle of it all. Calm. Shaken. But still composed. Passengers clapped as he walked toward the jet bridge, personally escorted by the captain. Justice didn't wait for the courtroom. Not that morning. Not at that gate. And yet, as Phill stepped onto the plane, as the crew guided him to a seat reserved just for him, as his heart finally steadied, a man across the aisle lowered his phone and whispered to someone on the other end. "Yeah, it's him. Confirmed. Phase 2 starts when the plane lands." Phill didn't hear it. Not yet. But everything that happened at security, it was only the beginning. Phill didn't notice the man watching him, didn't see the phone, didn't hear the whisper. He was too focused on breathing again. Real, steady breaths. Air that didn't feel like a threat. The captain guided him down the aisle. Passengers shifted aside, giving him space. Some nodded in support. Some whispered in shock. Others still had their phones recording just in case the story wasn't finished. Phill reached his seat. Bulkhead. Row 2. The captain placed a hand on his shoulder. "We're glad you're with us today." Meaning more than it sounded. Meaning they knew who he was, what he built, what depended on him. Phill gave a grateful nod. But behind him, 2 rows back, the watching man smirked. Short hair, beige hoodie, laptop case under his seat. He looked like any other traveler, but his eyes never left Phill. Not even for a second. He sent another message. He boarded. Confirmed timeline. Gate security caused a delay, but he's on the plane. Proceed with phase 2. He put the phone away. Sat back. Relaxed like everything was unfolding exactly as planned. The plane filled. Flight attendants did final checks. The captain returned to the cockpit. The door was sealed. Phill settled in. But his mind wouldn't settle. He replayed the moment at security. The grip around his throat. The eyes are full of something darker than protocol. He'd dealt with bias before. Suspicion. Dismissals. Interrogations disguised as policy. But never someone putting a hand on his neck. The applause still echoed in his ears. The crew's protection. The supervisor's warning. The unexpected justice. But under all of that, something else nagged at him. Sandra's face. Her rage. It was too intense. Too personal. Too targeted. Why him? Why is that? Phill leaned back. Closed his eyes. But the questions wouldn't fade. Across the aisle, the man in the hoodie opened his laptop, angled low so no one saw the screen. A map displayed. A blinking dot. Phil's seat number. A message popped up. Phase 2 is location confirmation. Phase 3 begins at landing. Maintain cover until the extraction team follows. He typed quickly. Acknowledged. He clicked a file titled Harbor Tech Systems, Prototype Manual Override. He scrolled through technical schematics. Phil's work. His design. His signature on the bottom of each blueprint. The man didn't smile this time. This wasn't a personal job. This was a mission. Flight attendants walked through the cabin. Good morning, folks. Final check before departure. The one closest to Phill paused beside him. Do you need anything? She asked softly. He shook his head. I'm good, thank you. But the attendant didn't walk away. She leaned down a little closer. What she did to you, it won't be ignored. We're filing everything. Phill gave a faint smile. Thank you. Really? She squeezed his shoulder gently and moved on. The man in the hoodie watched the interaction, studied every detail, made another note. The engines roared. The plane pushed back. Lights dimmed to soft blue. Safety video rolled. Phill stared forward, but his thoughts drifted again. His system meant everything. His team spent years testing every scenario, every failure point, every emergency procedure. He'd studied crashes, failures, human error, mechanical breakdowns. Aviation safety wasn't just technical, it was emotional. Every innovation meant saving a life, maybe hundreds. And today's meeting in Denver wasn't small. It was the final approval. If this presentation went well, airlines would start installing the system globally. Phill closed his eyes. Finally, something in his life would make the world safer. He had no idea someone on that same plane wanted to use his invention for something else. The plane accelerated, lifted, rose above the clouds. Passengers relaxed. Screens lit up. Coffee orders started. The usual calm settled over the cabin. But for Phill, calm never fully returned. Something was off. He could feel it. Not fear. Instinct. He scanned the passengers subtly. Nothing unusual. A family to his right. A quiet, older couple. A few business travelers are already working on laptops. A teenager wiping sleep from her eyes. Normal. But 3 rows behind him, the hoodie man kept glancing forward. Not obvious. Not aggressive. Just constant. Phill didn't know why it felt strange. He didn't know the man's mission. He didn't know someone had hacked into his design files months before. He didn't know someone was watching his career like a threat. He only felt something. Something that wouldn't settle. 30 minutes into the flight, Phill pulled out his tablet, opened his presentation, checked each slide, each line of code, each schematic. This was his focus, his refuge. But the tension still sat at the back of his mind. Everyone else moved on from the airport incident. The applause was already a memory. But Phill felt bruised inside. Invisible bruises. the kind that stayed long after hands were gone. He rubbed his throat gently. The pressure still lingered. He closed the tablet. He stared out the window. Clouds drifted below. Then a flash of movement caught his eye, a reflection. Not outside. Inside. The hoodie man stood up. I walked down the aisle slowly, head lowered, hands in pockets. Phill glanced forward again, pretending not to notice. The man stopped 2 rows ahead, opened the overhead bin, pretended to adjust his backpack, but Phill saw it. The sideways glances, the slight angle of his body. Watching, measuring. Phil's heartbeat picked up. A quiet warning. The man closed the bin gently and walked back to his seat, never looking directly at Phill, never showing his face long enough to track. But Phill saw the tattoo on his wrist, half hidden, barely visible, a small symbol, a circle with 3 lines crossing through it. Phill didn't know what it meant, but somewhere deep in his subconscious, it clicked. He had seen that symbol before. Not in textbooks, not in airports, not on people. He'd seen it on an encrypted file inside the HarborTech system, 3 months earlier, in a failed attempt to breach his prototype. He froze. The man wasn't a random traveler. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone knew who Phill was, where he was, what he was carrying. Someone needed him on this plane today. The man reached his row again, sat down calmly, and sent one last message. Target confirmed. Awaiting landing protocol. Phase 3 begins on arrival. Phill stared straight ahead, jaw tightening. He didn't know what was coming. He didn't know how deep the danger ran. He didn't know who hired the man, or why. But he knew one thing. This wasn't over. Not the attack at security. Not the stairs, not the symbol, not the feeling in his chest. Something bigger was moving, something he couldn't see yet, and whatever Phase 3 was, it was waiting for him on the ground. The plane touched a smooth altitude. Seatbelt signs stayed lit. The cabin hummed with that familiar, steady engine vibration. But Phil's thoughts were anything but steady. That symbol, that wrist tattoo, that almost hidden mark on the hoodie man's arm. It wasn't random. It wasn't innocent. It was the same symbol he spotted months ago during an unauthorized attempted breach of HarborTech's internal server. A breach aimed directly at his portion of the aviation-safety redesign. He remembered the alert, the line of code he flagged, the strange digital signature embedded in the attack. A circle crossed with 3 angled lines. He assumed it was a foreign hacking group, a random probing, a scare that would fade. But now, that same mark was sitting 3 rows behind him on a plane, breathing the same air, watching him from behind a laptop screen. Phill felt his stomach tighten. This wasn't a coincidence. Someone was following him, tracking him, planning around him. But why? He wasn't rich. He wasn't public-facing. He wasn't political. He was an engineer, a quiet one, the kind who preferred solving equations over dealing with people. But his project, the aviation-safety redesign, that was high stakes, high value, high impact, and high risk if placed in the wrong hands. Phill swallowed hard. Whatever this was, it was tied to his work. And if the hoodie man had access to his blueprints, then someone wanted more than just information. A soft voice pulled him back to the present. "Sir, coffee." Phill blinked. A flight attendant stood beside him, a warm smile, holding a tray. He nodded. "Yes, thank you." She poured carefully, but her eyes flicked sideways, toward row 5. Phill noticed. "You okay?" she whispered, barely audible. He hesitated. Her expression sharpened, just a little. Not fear. Awareness. Flight attendants notice everything. "I'm fine," Phill said quietly. I just think someone's watching me. She paused. Not dismissive. Not shocked. She leaned just an inch closer. Is it the man in the beige hoodie? Phil's breath caught. Yes. She nodded once. Firm. Calm. We've noticed him too. Phill stared at her. His voice thinned. You have. Crew keeps an eye on patterns, she whispered. He keeps glancing at you. And he's not reading. Not working. Just studying. Phill felt cold. The attendant placed a hand on the seat back, like she was adjusting something, but really shielding their conversation. Do you want me to alert the captain? She asked. Phill paused. A long pause. He didn't want another scene. He didn't want drama. He didn't want to sound paranoid. But the image of that strange wrist tattoo, the encrypted file breach, the man whispering phase 2 on the phone. Phill nodded. Yes. But quietly. She squeezed his shoulder. You got it. She walked away with practiced calm, like nothing was wrong. But the hoodie man watched her leave. And when she disappeared behind the curtain, he reached into his laptop case and pulled out a small black device. Phill didn't see it, but the passenger beside the hoodie man did. Their eyes widened slightly. Not enough to scream. Not enough to panic. But enough to shift uncomfortably. The man noticed the shift. He covered the device with his sleeve. And the passenger looked away quickly. Fear in their eyes. Phill sipped his coffee, hands slightly trembling. He tried to focus on the window again, but he couldn't shake the feeling. Something terrible was waiting for him on the ground. And this man behind him, he wasn't working alone. In the cockpit, the flight attendant quietly stepped inside. The door locked behind her. The captain and first officer turned. What's wrong? The captain asked instantly. She spoke in a hushed tone. The passenger we escorted earlier, Phill Smith, believes someone is watching him. 3 rows behind him. Male, beige hoodie, strange behavior. Could be nothing, but... The captain's eyebrows lowered. What kind of behavior? He hasn't looked away from him all flight. And earlier, he walked up the aisle pretending to get something from the overhead, but he wasn't checking anything. He was watching Phil's reactions. The captain exchanged a look with the first officer. Is he bothering anyone else? No. Just him. Does Phill feel threatened? He didn't say it outright, but yes. Something's wrong. The captain unbuckled. Keep the cabin calm. I'll take a walk. Back in the cabin, Phill pretended to scroll through his tablet. But his peripheral vision stayed locked on row 5. The hoodie man looked relaxed. Too relaxed. He typed slowly on his laptop. But the angle of the screen. Phill recognized something. It wasn't a document. It wasn't a movie. It didn't work. It was a program. A technical interface. Phill knew those symbols. I knew those patterns. It looked like someone accessing a control system. His chest tightened. No, it couldn't be. Not on a plane. Not mid-flight. He wasn't stupid. Airplane systems were secured, air-gapped, protected, but his own redesign wasn't fully implemented yet. And the hoodie man had the schematics. Could he adapt it? Bypass something? Phil's fingers trembled on the tablet. He took a slow breath. Another. He clicked open his system's internal diagnostics, a private tool stored on his tablet for emergencies. Just to check. Just to look. Just to confirm everything was stable. But the moment the interface loaded, Phill froze. A red notification blinked across the screen. Unauthorized signature detected linked device within 15 meters. Phil's heart punched his ribs. 15 meters. That was row 5. It was him. It was the hoodie man. It was happening right now. Phil's breath thinned. Panic prickled up his spine. Someone was trying to access the safety redesign system. from inside the plane. His system, his invention, his responsibility. He shot a look toward the curtain separating first class from the cockpit. Where was the captain? Where was the help? Phill swallowed. His throat burned. Of all days, of all flights, of all moments, this wasn't about harassment at security. That was never random. Not chaos. Not biased. It was a distraction. A delay. A way to isolate him. A way to ensure he missed the early boarding, so a certain person could get into place before him. Officer Sandra wasn't the beginning. She was the opening move. Phill felt his pulse slam. He turned his head, just enough to see the hoodie man. The man was already looking back, smirking, like he knew Phill had finally figured it out. The plane jolted slightly. Turbulence. Normal. But in Phil's mind, nothing felt normal anymore. The captain finally appeared from behind the curtain. Phill nearly exhaled in relief. But then, as the captain took his first step down the aisle, the hoodie man lifted a finger, tapped a key on his laptop. Phill saw it. A single command line executed. The red diagnostic alert on Phil's tablet changed instantly. Phase 3 activated system manipulation attempt detected. Phill shot to his feet. Captain! But before he could finish, a loud mechanical click echoed somewhere under the floor of the aircraft. A sound only an engineer would recognize. A sound no plane should ever make in flight. Passengers didn't hear it, didn't notice, didn't react. But Phill did. And the hoodie man? He slowly closed his laptop, folded his hands, and whispered, "Right on schedule." Phil's chest tightened. Whatever Phase 3 was, it had just begun. Phil's heartbeat thundered. The cabin hummed, unaware. Passengers sipped drinks, watched movies, dozed off. But beneath the floor, beneath the calm, something shifted. A faint mechanical click. Subtle. Wrong. Impossible to hear unless you knew the internal systems of an aircraft. Phill knew. His invention wasn't installed on this plane, but the hacker had the schematics. And Phill had just watched an unauthorized signature breach his diagnostic tool. It meant someone was piggybacking off his private interface, using his system as a backdoor, trying to manipulate something they should never touch. Phill stood frozen, eyes locked on the hoodie man, the smirk, the relaxed posture, the folded hands. He knew exactly what he'd done. The captain took another step down the aisle. Phill raised his voice, louder, urgent. "Captain, stop." The captain paused instantly. Every head in first class turned. Phill didn't care. This wasn't embarrassing. This was survival. The hoodie man calmly lifted his laptop again, not opening it, just holding it. A threat. Silent. Chilling. Phill lowered his voice, but his words shook. "There's an unauthorized access attempt on the aircraft's systems." The captain's eyes sharpened. He stepped closer. "What did you say?" Phill held up his tablet. Diagnostic alerts blinking red. Data streams jittering. Unauthorized fingerprints pulsing across the interface. "Someone is accessing my prototype framework from inside this cabin," he said. "That shouldn't be possible." The captain's face drained. He scanned the first-class cabin quickly. His gaze landed on the hoodie man, who sat perfectly still, like a predator studying two animals debating whether to run. The captain kept his voice low. "Is the plane in danger?" Phill swallowed. His throat ached from the earlier assault. His mind raced through possibilities. "No," he said quickly. "The plane isn't connected to my system. But someone is trying to use your work to spoof or mimic internal controls," the captain finished. Phill nodded. "Yes, and depending on what they're doing, it could confuse instruments or trigger alerts. or force a false reading. The captain's fists clenched. He stepped closer to Phill until their shoulders almost touched. "Stay with me," he whispered. Phill didn't have a chance to respond, because at that moment, the aircraft jolted. Hard. Not turbulence. Not the weather. Not routine. This was sharp. Suddenly. Violent. Passengers gasped. A few cried out. Cups spilled. The lights flickered once. Phill felt his stomach drop. The hoodie man didn't flinch. He smiled. Just slightly. The captain didn't waste a second. He grabbed the intercom by the galley. "Flight attendants, take your seats. Now." His voice carried a tone passengers rarely heard, urgency wrapped in steel. The hoodie man tapped another key. Phill saw it. One click. One command. The plane jerked again. A strange angle. A sideways drift. People yelled. A baby started screaming. Someone called out, "What's happening?" Phil's fingers tightened around the seat back. He turned to the captain. "Whoever he is, he's not trying to crash the plane." The captain frowned. "What makes you say that?" Phill kept his eyes locked on the hoodie man. "He's not making noise. He's not panicking. He's waiting. For what?" Phill exhaled shakily. "For us to land." The captain's jaw locked. He tapped his earpiece and spoke firmly. "We're locking down the cockpit. I want eyes on that man. Do not approach him until I return." He pushed through the curtain and sealed the cockpit door. Phill remained standing. Passengers stared at him now, confused, scared, seeking answers he didn't have. Then, a new alert appeared on his tablet. Anomaly detected, Euro alignment variance source. Unverified. Phil's chest tightened. The hacker wasn't attacking the engines, or navigation, or hydraulics. He was targeting the instruments. The plane wasn't failing, the readings were. Which meant, the pilots might think something was wrong when nothing actually was. A dangerous game. One that could force an emergency landing. One that could put them on the ground exactly where Phase 3 was meant to happen. Phil's voice dropped to a whisper. "He's forcing a diversion." The hoodie man finally looked directly at him. Dead on. Eyes cold. Steady. A long, chilling stare. Not anger. Not fear. Purpose. Phill felt it like a knife pressed to his spine. Someone wanted him on the ground. Not hurt. Not dead. Taken. The plane jolted again. Less severe, but noticeable. A flight attendant called from her jump seat. "Folks, please remain calm. We are stabilizing." Phill knew she was lying to keep the cabin settled. People murmured. Some prayed. One woman clutched her husband's hand. But the hoodie man, he sat motionless, breathing even, composed. This wasn't chaos to him. This was a schedule. A minute later, the captain reappeared over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're experiencing an unexpected system discrepancy. As a precaution, we are diverting to St. Louis for an emergency landing." Gasps filled the cabin. Phill closed his eyes. They weren't going to Denver anymore. They weren't going where he needed to present. They were going somewhere unfamiliar. Somewhere unplanned. Exactly what the hoodie man wanted. Phill whispered. "This is it. Phase 3, it's an extraction." He looked back at the hoodie man. The man nodded once. Not as a greeting. As confirmation. Phil's breath shook. He stumbled back into his seat, gripping the armrests. He felt the weight of everything pressing down. His invention. His name. His project. His responsibility. And now, his life. The hoodie man leaned forward slightly, and mouthed, "Don't run." Phil's blood went cold. The plane began its descent. The cabin trembled. Passengers cried quietly, but all Phill could focus on was the realization that he wasn't flying toward safety. He was flying straight into a trap. The descent felt wrong. Not like turbulence, like purpose, like something pulling them exactly where they wanted. Passengers gripped armrests. Prayers whispered. A child wailed. Phill stared at the window. Concrete drew closer. Runways glinted under a pale sky. St. Louis. The captain said it plainly. A diversion. An emergency. A new plan. Phil's mind raced. The hoodie man watched. No more covert typing. Now he simply observed. Calm. Patient. Ready. Cabin crew moved with a trained hush. Masks of calm. Voices low. But their eyes were knives. Searching. Scanning. Protecting. Phill tried to stay invisible. It's impossible now. He'd been the center of an airport incident. He'd been escorted by a captain. Names had been spoken into phones. Now they were headed into an unknown airport. An unplanned landing. Exactly what the attacker wanted. His hands trembled. He wanted to stand, to shout, to run. But the captain's announcement and the flight attendant's gestures insisted, remain seated. Stay calm. The plane touched down hard. A thud that made everyone flinch. The engines taxied. Doors prepared. A ground crew moved like ants outside. Remain seated until we're told otherwise, the crew said. Calm. Controlled. Reassuring. But beneath that veneer, tension screamed. As the jet bridge connected, Phill watched the hoodie man. He didn't stand. He didn't reach for anything. He simply folded his laptop and slid it into the case. Phill felt the pull of 100 eyes landing on him. Not all of them are hostile. Some are curious. Some fear. Some are suspicious. The captain moved down the aisle again. He stopped at Phil's row. Sir, he said quietly, walk with me. Phil's legs nearly refused, but he rose. They moved toward the front, through a curtain of uniforms and quiet orders. The ground crew awaited. A different crew than the airport where Phill began his day. Fewer smiles. More efficiency. Phill felt exposed. A target wearing a suit. The gate supervisor who defended him earlier stayed behind. Hand on his radio. Watching. Silent. The hoodie man watched them walk away. Not a flicker. Not a sign. Phill and the captain reached the jet bridge door. Security will meet us on the tarmac, the captain said. Phill wanted to ask questions. I wanted to demand action. I wanted to know who wanted him. I wanted to know why. But the captain only added, low. Stay close. Don't go anywhere alone. Phill nodded. He stepped down into the chill of the tarmac. Wind hit his face. Metal towered around him. Voices carried in the open air. A white van waited. Blacked windows. No logos. Phil's throat closed. Drivers cleared us, the captain said. Airport ops coordinated. Phil's mind jumped to terrible conclusions. Corporate shuttles. Security escorts. Extraction teams. But the van's license matched no airline. No official decal. He forced himself forward. Outside, a small cluster formed. Airport police. 2 men in suits. A woman in a dark coat with a clipboard. And the passenger? The suited man asked the captain. Phill Smith, the captain answered. The suited man looked at Phill with thin, polite curiosity. We'll escort him to a secure area, the man said. Routine protocol after an incident. Phill tried to process. Secure area. Routine. Protocol. He wanted the gate supervisor. Wanted the captain's team to stay close. Wanted the airline to put up a shield. Instead, 2 plainclothes men extended formal hands. Names given. Short. Professional. Phill offered his own hand, but his fingers felt heavy. "Will airline staff be present?" he asked. "Yes," the woman with the clipboard said. "A representative will accompany you." The captain stepped in. "He's coming with me," he said firmly. Phill felt a tiny mercy. Two men nodded. "Very well," one of them said. "But we'll need to take his phone for evidence." Phil's heart stuttered. "No," he said quickly. "I need my phone." "You'll have access in the secure area, Mr. Smith," the woman said. "Standard procedure." Phill swallowed. His phone was his lifeline. It held his work, his contacts, his notes, his diagnostics. He handed it over. A cold metal case opened. His phone was placed inside like evidence. A weight slid from his chest. Then a heavier weight replaced it. They walked to the van. The hoodie man remained on the plane. He stepped off last. No one stopped him. He watched as they drove away. Phil's breath hitched. The van's interior smelled of leather and coffee. The seats were too soft. The plainclothes men sat across from him. Quiet, professional, observant. One slid open a file. Several photos. A page labeled, Project, Harbortech, Smith. Phil's name printed in black. "This will be quick," the suited man said. "We'll ask a few questions, walk through the incident, and then we'll make recommendations." Phill wanted to say he'd already given statements. That dozens had recorded the security assault. That the airline had witnesses. But the man's next words stole his breath. "We believe this may be more than harassment. There are indications of targeted corporate espionage. We need to ask about your work." Phill looked at the photos in the file. Blueprints. Screenshots. His signature blurred across documents. "How did you?" he started. "We're asking the questions," the other man said. "Not the other way around." Phil's protest died. The van turned off the tarmac and merged with slow-moving airport traffic. Buildings passed. Hangars. Fuel trucks. A maintenance yard. The suited men moved like chess players. One of them spoke quietly into a mic. "We have a target. In transit to a secure location. Maintain a perimeter." Phil's skin tightened. "Who are you?" he asked. "We're with a federal task unit," the man said. "Joint operation." Phill remembered the tattoo symbol again. "Do you know who's behind the hack?" he asked. The man's eyes flicked. He studied Phill like a file. "Not yet," he said. "But we have leads. This airport incident is tied to a larger effort." Phill felt trapped between relief and dread. Relief that professionals were involved. Dread that professionals meant deeper danger. The van stopped at a nondescript building outside the airport perimeter. Doors opened. Bright fluorescent lights. Security cameras everywhere. They led Phill inside. A small room waited. An interrogation room, he realized. A table. 2 chairs. One-way glass. The woman with the clipboard locked the door. "Comfortable?" she asked. It was a ritual question. An icebreaker. Phill sat. He felt very small. "Can you tell us again what happened at security?" the suited man asked. He told the story. Short sentences. Precise details. Every movement at the terminal. Every word at the gate. They listened. Nodded. Typed. When he finished, the woman closed the file. "We'll need full access to your devices for forensic analysis," she said. Phill swallowed hard. His phone had already been taken. Now they wanted his tablet, his laptop, his encrypted drives. He hesitated. "My work is sensitive," he said. "If you access it, you must maintain chain of custody." The suited man smiled thinly. "We're aware." Phill placed his devices on the table. They began the wipes and checks. As the agents worked, The door behind Phill opened. A figure stepped in. Not a plainclothes officer. Not part of the task unit. A man in a beige hoodie. He removed his hood. His face was familiar now. Calm. Controlled. Smiling just enough. "Mr. Smith," he said. "Pleasure to meet you in person at last." Phil's stomach dropped. "How?" The suited men exchanged a look. "Who are you?" the woman demanded. The man's smile widened. "You should be asking them," he said, gesturing to the agents. The room seemed to tilt. The hoodie man glanced at Phill as if they shared a secret. "Phase 3 is proceeding," he said softly, "and the rest will fall into place once you hand over the key." Phil's hands clenched. "What key?" he managed. The hoodie man reached into his pocket and produced a small metal object. A custom USB. An odd shape. Recognizable. Phil's breath left him. "That isn't yours," he whispered. The hoodie man's eyes glittered. "Oh, but it will be," he said, "once we install the patch." The suited men moved in a flash. Phill realized with a cold clarity he had been betrayed from the inside. The agent pulling his tablet toward himself wore the same symbol tattooed on his wrist. Phil's world collapsed into a single truth. The extraction, the diversion, the security incident. All staged. The people who were supposed to protect him were part of the plan. He was surrounded. No window. No escape. He met the hoodie man's gaze. "You were inside the plane," he said. "You were the man behind the laptop. And now?" The hoodie man returned softly. "Now you're inside the room," said the suited man with the tattoo. "You're inside the operation." Phill looked from face to face. The captain's earlier kindness flickered in his mind. Was that genuine? Or was it a performance? His throat tightened. He realized, with a clarity that cut like glass, that Phase 3 had never been about theft of data alone. It was about taking him. And now, cornered, with devices in front of him and hostile faces around him, Phill understood the worst possibility. They didn't just want his work. They wanted him. Phil's pulse pounded in his ears. The room shrank. 4 walls. 1 table. 3 hostile faces. No exits. He wasn't an engineer now. Not a presenter. Not a corporate traveler. He was prey. The hoodie man placed the strange metal USB on the table and slid it toward him. Its shape was unmistakable. A prototype access key. Something that should have been locked inside a HarborTech vault. "Take it," the hoodie man said. Soft. Patient. Deadly. Phill stared at it. His throat tightened. "I didn't bring that," Phill said quietly. The tattooed agent smirked. "We know. We got it from someone else." "Who?" Phill demanded. Silence. Just the hum of fluorescent lights. The woman stepped forward. Clipboard tucked under her arm. She folded her hands like she was presenting an offer. "We don't want to hurt you," she said. "We need you. And we need the activation protocol to your system's diagnostic kernel." Phil's stomach dropped. "That kernel is locked," he said. "It's offline. Secure." The agent laughed softly. "You're here, aren't you? That makes it less secure." Phil's fingers curled. His own creation was being turned into a weapon. Not to crash planes. Not to sabotage airlines. But to disable certain flight crews' ability to respond. To manipulate cockpit decisions. To create selective chaos. Targeted aviation sabotage. A nightmare scenario. He inhaled slowly. "You'll never get it," Phill said. The hoodie man leaned forward, elbows on the table. "Oh, Phill," he said gently. "You already gave it to us." Phill froze. "What are you talking about?" The hoodie man tapped the table slowly. "Your tablet." Phill felt ice slide through his veins. "You cloned it," he whispered. The tattooed agent grinned. We cloned everything. Phil's heart hammered. He'd been walking around with a breached device. He'd been using it, checking diagnostics, opening files. Everything he touched, everything he reviewed, everything he tried to protect, had been mirrored directly into their system. They didn't need the physical key. They needed him to confirm the final passcode, the one thing not stored on any device, the one thing only he knew. The woman placed the clipboard on the table, turned it toward him. A single phrase typed at the top: enter final authorization code, Harbor, Delta, Level 7. Phill stared at it. If I enter that, he said, you'll have control of the kernel. And the system, the tattooed man added. And the authority. And the leverage. Phill shook his head slowly. You'll cripple the aviation network. The hoodie man smiled softly. Only parts of it. Phill tried to breathe. I tried to think. Tried to find logic in the panic, tightening his chest. He didn't know who these people were. Not by name, not by affiliation, but their coordination. The airport incident, the diversion, the secure agents. These weren't amateurs. This was organized, funded, calculated, and he was at the center of their web. The hoodie man leaned closer. Enter the code, he said, or we release everything we took from your devices. Every schematic, every blueprint, every vulnerability. Phil's jaw clenched. You think I care about my job? He whispered. You think that's leverage? No, the tattooed agent said. You care about the people those systems are meant to protect. Phill felt his chest cave. They were right. He did. He cared about pilots, flight crews, passengers, families, people who had no idea how fragile the system really was. And these men, they weren't trying to steal a design. They were trying to create a catastrophe they could control. Phill exhaled sharply. I won't help you. The woman stepped forward. We figured you'd say that. She lifted her hand, snapped her fingers. The door unlocked. Footsteps echoed. Heavy, authoritative. Phil's blood ran cold. Two new figures entered. Not agents. Not accomplices. The airport security command team. Real uniforms. Real badges. Real authority. Phil's breath shook. The command chief looked furious. We've been looking everywhere for you, he snapped to the agents. You took a diverted passenger without authorization? The agents froze. The hoodie man blinked slowly. A flicker of annoyance crossed his face. The woman straightened. This is a federal. It's not. The chief cut in. I checked your badges. They aren't real. Phil's head jerked up. What? The tattooed agent reached toward his waistband, but three uniformed officers drew first. Hands where we can see them, the chief shouted. Chaos exploded. The hoodie man lunged for the USB. Phill grabbed it first. The woman tried to bolt for the door. An officer tackled her before she reached the hallway. The tattooed agent swung at a guard. Another officer hit him with a baton. Phill pressed himself against the wall. Breath shaking, heart slamming. The hoodie man dodged one officer. Another. He was fast. Too fast. He reached the door. Almost made it. But the captain, Phil's captain, appeared in the doorway and slammed him into the frame. The hoodie man dropped to the floor. Hard. Officers surged. They handcuffed all three. Phill stared, chest heaving. He was shaking. Almost collapsing, but not out of fear, out of sheer relief. The captain stepped toward him. You okay? He asked softly. Phill nodded slowly. I think so. The command chief looked at Phill, then at the agents. We interrogated the flight crew, the chief explained. They said a suspicious man followed you into the cabin. He nodded toward the captain. He insisted something was off. We checked the airport cameras, the captain added. These three weren't on duty. Not on any list. The chief stepped closer. These aren't federal agents, he said. They're part of a coordinated tech extortion group. We've been tracking them across multiple states. Phil's knees buckled. He caught himself on the table. The chief lowered his voice. They use airport incidents to isolate targets. You weren't chosen by accident. You were chosen because of your work. Phill swallowed hard. The TSA officer, he whispered. Was she involved too? The chief nodded. She's already in custody. Phill stared at the floor. His pulse is still erratic. How did you find me? He asked the captain. The captain smiled faintly. You left your boarding pass in your first-class seat. I thought. Phill never leaves things behind. He shrugged. So I followed my instinct. Phill exhaled shakily. 3 officers escorted the arrested imposters away. The hoodie man turned once, met Phil's eyes, and spoke his final words as he was dragged out. This isn't over. Phill felt cold. But the captain put a steady hand on his shoulder. Yes, it is, he said. Hours later, Phill was seated in a real secure room. Real agents. Real badges. Real statements. They apologized for everything. For failure. For the risk. For the terrifying chain of events. Phill answered questions. Signed reports. Gave access to logs. But one question stayed stuck in his mind. Why me? A federal investigator paused. Your system, he said. It's too advanced. Too powerful. Too desirable. Phill stared down at his hands. Steady now. Calm now. He had always known aviation was fragile. He never imagined he'd become a target because he tried to protect it. But as he left the building hours later, escorted by the captain and 2 agents, a small crowd waited at the curb. He had always known aviation was fragile. He never imagined he'd become a target because he tried to protect it. But as he left the building hours later, escorted by the captain and 2 agents, a small crowd waited at the curb. Passengers from his flight. People who had watched him face harassment. People who had clapped for him earlier. People who'd been scared on the plane but trusted him without knowing why. They applauded again. Soft. Warm. True. Phill blinked back emotion. The captain leaned in. You saved a plane full of people today, he said. Phill shook his head. No, he whispered. You saved me. The captain smiled. Sometimes justice doesn't wait for the courtroom, he said. Sometimes it runs straight down the jet bridge. Phill finally breathed, fully, since the morning began. He stepped into the sunlight, safe, alive, and ready to protect everything he built. Because this was more than a near kidnapping, more than an airport assault, more than corporate sabotage. It was a warning, and Phill was done being prey.